Hello, class. Here to talk today about Chapter 5, which is all about background checks, references, and verifying employment eligibility. Several important things I want to discuss today. We're not going to cover everything in this chapter. A few things I think are kind of outside the realm of this class, but here's kind of the main points that I want you to know for Chapter 5. First off is, I'm sure if you've ever had a job or, worked in any type of workplace setting, you've been exposed to background checks. Either you've had one yourself or maybe you've conducted one on somebody you're trying to hire. But obviously, the main reason that we do background checks is to avoid negligent hiring. It is simple as that. So we want to verify, that the individuals that we're bringing into our organization are indeed who they say they are and have the qualities that we're looking for. Again, pretty self-explanatory. But again, from a legal standpoint and kind of the purpose of our class, we do them to avoid negligent hiring. And actually on page 157 of your textbook, there it lays out the elements of a claim for negligent hiring. So let's say you hire somebody who has been in jail for 20 years, maybe stole cars, maybe, assaulted individuals, and you didn't do any type of check to check that person's background, and you hired somebody like this, and then that person ends up stealing from you or maybe injures one of your fellow coworkers. So that could be grounds for negligent hiring because you didn't do a thorough job of checking out any risks associated with that person. So let's say that person who was injured, for example, would like to bring a suit against your organization. Well, page 157, lays out a good kind of discussion on the elements of a claim for negligent hiring. So make sure you know that chart again. I don't expect you to memorize every word, but kind of make sure you understand the basic elements of a claim for negligent hiring. And those are kind of based on the idea of foreseeability. That given somebody that you hire, what can you foresee somebody doing something like this? Or what are kind of I don't want to say the odds, but what is the information that you've attained that could lead you to believe that somebody could be negligent? So make sure you kind of understand that aspect of it. And when we're looking at somebody's background, obviously, we want to distinguish between arrests and convictions. Obviously, in most U.S. states and the federal government, generally arrests are not something that you do in a background check or things like that, because again, arrests happen all the time, for a variety of reasons and don't necessarily create a conviction for a felony or a misdemeanor. So generally, as a general rule, you cannot ask an applicant about any arrests that they've had. But you can ask them about any convictions that they have had, whether that's a felony or a misdemeanor. Now, again, this is not a true criminal law class, but understand, and I think your book describes it, kind of the basics between the differences between misdemeanors and felonies. So make sure you kind of have a general idea. You probably already know that anyway, but at least for in our textbook, and make sure you understand differences between misdemeanors and felonies. But again, and this could be a simple test question. Kind of know the differences between arrests and convictions, what you can ask for and what you can't ask for in the pre-employment process. So, and your book does discuss a little bit about credit reports, and credit reports are kind of a niche discussion. I'm not going to ask any questions on the exam about credit reports because, again, there are so many different state-by-state regulations about when credit reports can or cannot be used in the pre-employment process. So I'm not even going to have you worry about it. I mean, read the part in the textbook just so you're aware, but I'm not going to ask you any information about credit reports, so don't really worry too much about it. So, moving forward beyond that is that's all about background checks. Now about references, references. Obviously, we ask and we do references to ask people who may know that person to make sure what they think of them. As long as I've been doing this type of work, you would be amazed about how often somebody will list somebody as a reference and it ends up being a really bad reference. And why that happens, I don't know. You would think that if you're going to list references, you would be somebody who's going to speak admirably about you, talk about your good qualities. And again, the vast majority that I've worked with in my career have been in that realm, but you would be surprised how many people list a bad reference as part of their background information. So it's always fascinating to me. The one kind of legal issue that I want you to know about references is this idea of defamation. So Your book does talk about, like, I think it's on page 177, the elements of a claim for defamation. I don't expect you to know the elements of a claim, but do know that defamation is one of the main issues with references. And that's basically, so if you give somebody a reference and you think they're giving you a positive reference, but then that person just destroys your character. It says all kinds of untrue information that's no way to be proven. It's completely unfactual. And then you don't get hired because of that person's poor reference. Well, theoretically, you could bring a suit against them for defaming your character. And again, I don't expect you to memorize the elements of a claim for that, but make sure you understand how defamation relates to references. And then finally, kind of the last part of this chapter about verifying employment eligibility. I mean, obviously, I think we all kind of inherently understand why we verify employment, to make sure somebody has the legal right to work in the United States. For purposes of our class, we're talking just about USA employment. And again, so we don't want to be hiring individuals who don't have a legal right to work in the United States. So that's why we do, verifying employment eligibility. So page 183 of your textbook talks about the IRCA, the Immigrant Reform and Control Act, and kind of what goes into that. I think there are two main requirements that go into the IRCA. Make sure you understand what those two elements are, about why we have what we have to do legally to make sure we're in compliance, to make sure that we are only hiring individuals, again, who have a legal requirement, legal ability to work in the U.S. Now, again, obviously, full U.S. citizens have a full legal right, but again, there are a million other different statuses, whether, permanent resident, if you're on a visa, there's a million different things about how you can legally work in the United States. And again, our sole purpose is whether or not you do or you do not have the legal right to work in the United States. So that's why the IRCA comes in. And your book does talk a little bit about E-Verify and about, that's the electronic system that helps us determine who is eligible. And again, I'm sure, if you've ever had a job, you've probably had to give copies of your driver's license, social security card, your passport, your foreign resident card, all these different elements to determine if you're eligible to work. And again, I don't expect you to know the little nuances of how that process works, but make sure you have a basic understanding of what E-Verify is and how it's used. So, well, those are the main elements that I want you to know for Chapter 5. Again, all very, very necessary things to help us make sure we're hiring legally and we're and people that we're employing have the full right to work in the United States. So, as always, let me know if you have any questions, but thank you so much, and we'll see you soon for Chapter 6.